to, just to touch on, I guess we've done what we've done over recent weeks. We've looked at resistance to nourishing change, which is, resistance to nourishing change is really the yucky, stucky, messy place we can all get into. And, just to recap that a bit, it's a slight oversimplification, but resistance to nourishing change is the change we could achieve but won't. It's not all resistance. Okay, so then we moved on to hope, which we've looked at recently, and looked at hope, given that resistance to nourishing change is that which can pull us down. Hope certainly is that which we can pick us up. And we looked at hope particularly in terms of sources of hope in true rest, contribution from hurt, and purpose. And what I want to move on to today, but I guess if we look at the three of those sort of current themes, resistance to nourishing change and hope and today pride, and take it and just flick back for a minute to the beginning of these forums, which were a contribution to COVID. That's where it came from. And at that time, I talked about the Pellan lift, that Pellan has the ability to lift people up. And it can in some ways be presented easily. It can be presented in finite chunks, small lessons. I think it is a particular strength of David Pellan's mind that you could just come in and take some of this. He called it a philosophy of human behavior, which would, in a sense, have some assumptions in it that you've got to learn a whole bunch of it before you can make sense of it. That's what a philosophy is. But the strength of his mind and the originality of his mind, well, that's the case. Well, it's certainly coherent philosophy. You can simply take one bit of it and use it. Someone could simply come in on Pellan, learn a whole bunch about true rest, take that away, and that's all they ever got from Pellan, and it will work. And I think that's quite unusual. And I guess what I've done is, taken his work and played with it and made it accessible, made it understandable, and make it practical and deep at the same time. Got that. It is just to share with you, and we had the 50th anniversary of David Pellan's death coming up. We're going to put together a program over some months, calling it the Year of David. And then the 15th of June next year, is the 50th anniversary of Pellan, the opening of Pellan. I'm going to call it the Year of Pellan. So I got 2 years of celebration, okay? And I guess there is sort of pride in that. And I guess what pride is I think it's an ability to dig inside ourselves and hold on to something we have done, and etch it. We talked last couple of weeks about hope in terms of true rest, purpose and contribution from hurt. I think with pride, we can zero in on the necessity of feelings of accomplishment, and also how useful, really, and coin a phrase, cool, that tool is. If you're not getting feelings of accomplishment, you're in trouble. There are feelings of accomplishment there for you, and you're rubbishing them or not paying attention to them or not noticing them or taking them for granted or going on to the next problem or pushing the feelings of accomplishment away by getting into a fight with your brother, sister, boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, whoever. There are a lot of things we do to mesh with our feelings of accomplishment and not hold on to them. And I think it's the holding on to feelings of accomplishment, almost wherever they come from, because as you know, I go to, I'm part of a philosophy circle in London, South London Philosophy Circle. And in the main, it's not exclusively, thank goodness, but it is sort of predominantly elder white males, academics. And I'm not an academic, so I had a bit of trouble fitting in there. And they are very academic. And I started presenting material there from my perspective, which they accepted, which is not an academic perspective. And it was one of my presentations there where I first started developing the material around pride. I think there's something very, you could almost say David Pellin was a real academic, but he was just an academic of sort of himself. He was an academic of the University of David Pellin, because he really developed thought in quite an abstract way. In the film, there are, him engaging with people in a very moving way, there's no doubt. But his thought was sort of abstract in his words, on his terms. So he didn't I've got an outside noise for the moment. Is it interrupting too much? Anyway, it'll go away. He didn't do that much application to themes, and I guess, but on the other hand, it's very, very comprehensive. So I'm sort of taking it and applying it to themes like hope and pride. And the way I've always been interested, right from the beginning, particularly working with very deprived, unhappy, not very successful families, with lots of social and mental health issues, including going to jail. I mean, my point of entry was someone in that family was in prison. And so it started there. That's why I started Strength and Health first. Because I saw very early that you have a family of 6 and, all the problems in the world. And, other people have experience with it. 1 or 2 of those kids did well. What's the difference between the one who did well and the one who went to jail? And I guess I spent a lot of time thinking about that. And then more recently, and then working with foster carers and foster children, and the one thing foster kids do not want, don't tell anyone I've got foster parents. They do not want that. Oh, you're the foster kid, or you never see your mummy. Whole lot of stuff there. And I was at a conference and I met a group of young people. And they were there. It was an international conference. And they were the Italian Association of Care Leavers. There was a group of young people who had grown up in care and were claiming some pride in having been foster kids rather than being ashamed of being foster kids. And then a lot of reading on my part, how did those, and it's still a really big question for me. How did those people go through those generations of slavery and turn out the young people who are around today, and particularly young women, playing a, absolutely front page role in terms of American politics and America's chance of healing. And I think there is something, because pride, there is a way that hope is sort of looking to the future. Pride essentially is the past. I mean, when I said, I enjoyed saying it. When I said, I'll read the Credo, because with pride. And yeah, and when I said it, I meant it, because, I flashed back to when I first put those safety rules in place, which, see, you'll remember all the wild stuff that's happening in the human potential movement all those years ago. Safety wasn't a concern, and I put safety in place right up front. And yeah, so I look back to that with pride. I have pride in Pellen's safety record, which is unmatched. So pride is there's a place where we're looking back to something we've come through. And one of my first points of interest was, which I've moved away a bit, pride in general has a bad press. And I won't sort of go into it now, but I think there's something in my field of work in the helping professions which is threatened by those who can do well without us, and do well with it. Not everyone gets therapy. And some people do really well in life, never getting any therapy and never even knowing what therapy is. And they do well. How? And you know, I do go back to how did people survive slavery, of which there's always had been literature, but there's an increasing literature now. And of course, there's, you know, extensive literature about how people survived the Holocaust, how people survived the camps. And I guess it's a slightly different way of looking at Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. So we come through with pride. And so I want to come at pride from a positive around which there's a coded negative, because I think people have survived all sorts of impossibilities in our long history, you know, 100,000 years, whatever number you want to put on it, and all the terrible time that we're in that. I think one of the elements is pride. One of the elements is holding on to how people have come through tough times. And I think there's a slightly in psychotherapy, there's, you know, the psychotherapeutic relationship can be a dependent one. And the person who's getting the feelings of accomplishment by making a contribution is the professional person. I won't go down that path extensively, but I've always been concerned with those issues. And then looking at, you know, how do people do it without therapy? That was one of my early questions, because some people do. Just the same and as much, because I'm as, you know, it's the way I make my living. But you know, just as, you know, as I said recently here, while I'm a huge supporter of AA, I know some people do it in another way. Some people do it cold turkey. I've known people who've done it cold turkey. And we probably don't know how many people have done it cold turkey, because it's off. There's something about, at times, because I guess one of the things I'm saying here is that if pride is a force that can enable people to survive the worst of situations, maybe we should give it another look and not give it a bad press. And I think in our work, you know, how do people, because I think if we put it in sort of Pelham terms, what are the feelings of accomplishment that give you pride? What are the feelings of accomplishment that give somebody pride? And I think they would be the feelings of accomplishment that people hold on to and hold on to and hold on to. And I am coming at it from a particular sort of political perspective. I think there'd be different ways to look at it. But there's no question, well, I haven't got the date at my fingertips, but it's today or tomorrow. the march across the bridge in Selma, Alabama. You know, the whole civil rights movement was what it did, and what the people who are carrying it forward now are doing, is taking the pride that was there, you know, 300 years ago, 400 years ago, and somehow holding on to this strand, we survive. There's not the literature around that. A whole lot of reasons. The way there is the literature around how the Jewish people survive. But what I've been saying here, thank you, Steve. Yeah, the march across, Steve just said the march across the bridges today. Oof. First one without John Lewis. Yeah. So there was you know, Jews and black people in America who were slaves. I presented here recently how somehow they held on to hope. They held on to hope in the face of hopelessness. You know, there is no way my children are going to see freedom. You know, if I'm a slave in America, in Alabama, in 1790, 1810, it could not even be conceived that my children will achieve freedom. And yet, I, you know, developed a church, developed songs, developed strengths, developed ways of relating to each other. So there was some hope, just the same. I'm not black, I'm not Jewish. Just the same for the Jewish people next year, Jerusalem. No, there's no way, no hope. No hope next year, Jerusalem. In 1850. And yet, I think as well as hope, there was pride, that somehow or other pride was not killed. Now, if you want to really kill someone off, take away their pride. And you can see that somehow or other, Indigenous people in Australia, Canada, America, have not in the same way being able to hold on to their pride. I think the way we, the conquering white people, took away their belief systems, and then of course we fed them alcohol. And pride's a difficulty there. Pride's a difficulty in those communities. You know, the American term is the res. What's happening on the res, the reservation. Yeah, I guess I'm presenting it here, and I want to run it into the next couple of meetings in a fairly, in a very general way, bringing in the Pelham tools. I think it's feelings of accomplishment and purpose. You know, those two are very much related. and then doing something with feelings of accomplishment, so establish and hold on to positive memory links, and then those positive memory links become a chain. And I think if I take the example of the indigenous people in 3 countries that I know very well, and part of the race and nation that took away their nation. So there isn't when pride isn't there, it's a little bit chicken and egg, I know, so I don't know quite which one first, and I've got it all worked out. I'm only got a little bit of the truth about pride. But it's coming at it very deliberately from this other place. Because I think it could be argued that it's almost sort of people in power, people who've got, the political or intellectual status, whether it's Shakespeare or religious leaders or professionals, sort of become aware of the destructive side of pride and make that prominent. But, pardon the expression, but, to hell with it, that's their problem. Don't come along and take away people from pride, take away the pride from people who don't have the status. So it does, I know it, comes back on some of the ways I am motivated by a certain take on power in society where it belongs. And, I guess we've got the lovely example, don't we? It's called Gay Pride. It's called Gay Pride Week, Gay Pride March. I was up late one night and feeling sort of miserable, and this is years ago, and I was just flicking around television, and there was this big march of men and women, gay men and women in this march. And I looked at it, and I knew where that was. It was Phillip Street, Sydney. I couldn't believe it. There's a march going on. That's where I grew up. That's my hometown. And, I grew up in a homophobic Australia. And to see this sort of gay march in Sydney, and of course, gay march in Sydney are just routine, Sydney has a gay march and they have great fireworks, and their fireworks go off earlier than anybody else's because of time zones and blah, blah, blah. But I mean, it really had that huge effect on me, and how much that articulation, gay pride, and then the whole move, Black is Beautiful, claiming pride. Does anyone want to come in? Mary.
Well, I was interested in, early on you said holding on to feelings of accomplishment wherever they came from. And then what you said about memory links, because I'm in the middle of a struggle with being anxious about somebody else in the household I'm in. And if I get a bit low nowadays, I've built enough positive memory links that if I'm feeling down, that, okay, I'm not going to be trapped for 6 months. I've built, you know, with the help I got from Al-Anon, I don't go to automatic fear as soon as I'm miserable for 5 minutes. But I was really concerned because I find anxiety so freezing and gripping. And I was concerned that, oh, it's gonna, I can't challenge it, it's gonna take me into a low, and then I'll be in it, I'll stay in it. And fortunately, I had some different tasks I could do. One of them was not having been efficient, and noticed who on Facebook had bought the book about John and wanting to follow up and get reviews on Amazon. And so anyway, I had a number of tasks, some of them admin, some of them not. And I could really feel that they helped me come back into the present, even if it didn't last. And, you know, if I was doing something like walking on the beach, I couldn't help where my thoughts went. So it's about a 3 or 4 day struggle. And I've been pursuing little feelings of accomplishment. And, you know, that, I suppose that's what's that phrase in Al-Anon about getting well if you keep busy? I can't remember what it is, but trying to keep busy. And I don't feel out of it, but I haven't sunk. And for me, that sinking or being trapped is you know, was a fear of mine for years after the swings weren't as intense on the downside. So sorry, I didn't really mean to be that long, but I was just thinking that about feelings of accomplishment. And also, you know, I guess I don't really tap my pride about it, because I still have this insecurity that, sorry, my pride is how far I did come using the pendulum and the other tools about contribution from hurt and purpose and things, how much I managed to change. And a lot of the time I do have pride about that. I can lose it. I can be scared I'm going to be knocked off that perch of success and fall back into my old habits, and about staying low. And so I don't really know I can't really wrap up, because I don't really know where to go with that. I just wanted to underline the feelings of accomplishment and the you know, my gratitude at having that tool. Without it, I would have stayed frozen. And I think, because there's a pretty high level of anxiety. And sorry, I'm a bit slow thinking. What was that other little thought just before I finish? And the memory links, just feeling that, you know, an incident like the last few days where I can have little plateaus in between the getting anxious again, and building on those little stepping bits of I got back into the present there, I got back into the present there. I guess I don't feel the same safety about being able to not be stuck around anxiety as I do feel now around lows. Anyway, sorry, a bit rambly, but what you were saying relates to where I am, you know.
No, that's okay. I think that's really important, because I think there's certainly a relationship between pendulum swings and resistance to nourishing change. You know, we looked at that before. The low will, you know, in the high will do the things that set up the low, and in the low will focus on the negative and give resistance to nourishing change. Free reign, that simple, almost technical. But I think there's something about going through the whole thing about sitting out a deep low. I think there's something about that where pride can really be useful. I think we could almost say that the Pelham take on pride, it will enable us to hold on to and then do more with really significant feelings of accomplishment. In particular, you know, some of those around survival. Yeah, where I haven't yet got into the part of pride that, you know, Shakespeare, when he finished writing The Tempest thing, can look back at all the other plays, you know. I haven't looked at that bit of pride yet. I'm almost coming from the part of pride as something that enables people to survive that which they should not survive. And trying to do it so, like we do with true rest. So it's not just accidental that someone lucked out on it, but we can sort of formalize it a bit. You know, hi, Elizabeth. So the link between pride and feelings of accomplishment. And then I think pride can enable us to the simple thing is hold on to the feelings of accomplishment.
Can I? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. That's fine.
I've been thinking as you're talking and wondering about being taught what it is that we take pride in, which is so often a kind of a culturally determined success, ideas of success, that there's a pride, you know, that it can feed the pendulum, because it says it, what is it, that the pride precedeth the fall or something like that. So it's like that kind of pride that goes along with being a winner. But I've been hearing myself using the word ownership in thinking about this pride, that there's the shame can drop away somehow when one is able to grant oneself ownership, you know. Oh, good Lord, I'm gonna have to keep saying one's a story, but that I could even have a feeling of ownership even before I could find my community. It's something that I could even manage to do for myself. which is very, very powerful, which is owning my story in some way that doesn't bring this crushing shame, which I think comes from carrying the idea of other people and social ideas in my head, so that I'm watching myself and feeling that I'm falling short. So there's something about really bringing it home and not having the consensual, that the cultural dictates. You know, I was downtown last night, so there was, capitalism appeared to be failing with COVID. There's a lot of homeless people. So just been thinking a lot about, I don't know, the stuff that I used to feel pride in is that I was, look at me, I'm winning because I'm making it. Now that feels like random or luck or a certain cultural story that going to fail me with my health or this trip or whatever, but that there's something very comforting about ownership, that you can't lose it. It feels like a really strong first step.
Yeah, I think that's nice. I think you're right. I think without ownership, we don't get it. We don't get pride. And without, I'd almost say, without picking up on what you said, without ownership, we don't get pride. Without pride, we don't make it. So somehow and sometimes the ownership, because I know there's something about, some of you have been through this with me. Saying, I've been divorced 4 times. And it's sort of owning that. And because I can feel shame, I can feel failure. And that takes me down. And okay, I've been through that. So I think there's something about ownership and transparency, because it's a big theme. We'll stay on it for a while. It's a big theme because there are those things that, and I know I went through a whole thing about pride first.
Oh no, I can wait. It's not. I can pass for Mary.
Well, thanks, Cynthia. It was only brief. I just wanted to say about the relationship between openness and transparency and pride. And I was very conscious of that when I decided, as I was trying to build a professional identity in California, that I was going to do it with the pride in having overcome the most extreme debilitation of the pendulum swings. And I'm really glad I did that, because it's, otherwise I did have some shame about not having an established career in the cultural things Tamara was talking about, but it sure would have been worse if I was just hiding. I think it would have been worse. It was the right choice for me anyway. That's all I wanted to say.
Peter, I think you're, are you trying to say something?
Do you want to come in, Victoria?
Well, Cynthia was waiting to say something, and then she let me go first.
Oh, sorry.
Yes, and actually, I was actually waiting to say something since before Tamara. No, I was thinking about the whole, when you were mentioning the gay pride movement, and one of the things that I had been involved in, I'm not anymore, but my spouse was involved in MCC. It was a church that was in the gay and lesbian community, and she was a pastor of that church for a while. And one of the things that we found was so important, I was thinking about pride in relation to three big things with in strata, social strata, awareness strata, and then perseverance strata, being able to stick with things. But one of the things that I thought was one of the biggest, and I know, Peter, that's not a big thing for you, but one of the biggest damaging things that people in the gay and lesbian community faced was being told very clearly, God doesn't love you. God hates you. And that was what MCC, the primary thing was about, was saying, no, that's not true. That's not the, and doing research around that in terms of, theologians and the like. But why that was so damaging is because feeling, whether or not you believe in God, whether or not you care about God or thing, having been told you're not allowed to believe in God and that God hates you, really makes, in terms of the pride, and made it so that there was no reason to try to be good, no reason to not get into drugs and alcohol, no reason not to do destructive. Well, God hates me anyways, so I might as well just be destructive. And and the shame of people, which was far worse when people were trying to play straight and then they got married in a heterosexual relationship, and granted there might have been kids who weren't born because of that, but the damage that created to all sorts of people, with the hiding and it just, and there was a sense that people didn't care about themselves, and then we had the AIDS crisis, and they were told that, well, this was God's punishment. Just that, the damage of that shame into I mean, it's heartbreaking. And I mean, and I don't know why. I mean, my mom and I mean, I remember when they were afraid to go to the gay pride parade because they might get on TV and lose their jobs, and in fact lose me. I mean, that was a real worry. And I remember one time Joyce, it was Melissa Etheridge, was on the cover of like Life magazine with her child and stuff. And Joyce, who was, they broke up when I was in high school, and there was a goofy relationship, but we made up. And we actually had a semi-decent relationship afterwards when I was an adult. And I went to her house, and she says, I look, she's on the cover of Newsweek. I remember what my and your mother went through. and I'm not sure if that there's, but I don't know, but I'm thinking of that in terms of pride and just this sheer, and the one other thing I wanted to bring up, which is not kind of related, but it's sort of not to what I just said, but one of the things that I enjoy watching is magical girls anime, in Japanese, and one of them, they sort of transform into, these usually junior high girls transform into these beautiful outfits and fight bad guys and fight monsters and stuff like that. And there's this one thing that they do that is just, it's usually when they level up, when they really get strong, is when they're faced against some monster, they have no reason to believe they're going to win. None at all. I mean, they're big, powerful, they get everything else. But one of the things that they say at one point is "Zettai ni akiramanai," which is I will never give up. And then they get all this power, and they can defeat this monster they had no reason to believe they could defeat. I mean, they also pull together, but that, in terms of perseverance strategy, and talk about the pride in that, there's no who do you think you are, and that's what the monsters will say. Who do you think you are? You're just this little girl. You can't beat me. and they said, no, I know I can't, but I got something to protect, and I'm not going to give up. So
Please.
you brought up, I'm sorry, I was just giving you the thumbs, but you brought up something about having different goals, different, setting different things up as part of the whole thing. Does that, are you understanding what, am I making that clear? Like there's different points that are positive. And so are nothing.
Yeah.
That's what I was hearing from what you were saying, and how you can look back and see the way you, how far you've come. And I think like with the civil rights, same thing with women's rights, seeing how you can't just say it's all or none. It's all these different steps that we had. And a part of the pride is just staying with it and keeping going, even if you're not making any progress right then. And I was just going to say, there was this big act that got passed last night by the Senate in the US of the COVID. I believe it's huge, with a lot of money for the poor and people who weren't working, and lots of other things. And I was very excited, and then I realized, is that the same bill that I went to see Rubio and Rick Scott's office about? Because I was back like in March or something. And I went with Friends Committee on National Legislation, and we lobbied their aides. No, at the time we had no idea what they would do or what they thought about what we do. Except that the aides cried when we told them stories about people in poverty and children without food and what that does to them. I mean, they were very sympathetic. And I took that as a win, that it was, that was well, I didn't really want to make them cry, but I mean, the fact that they could relate to what we were saying and have some empathy for it, I took that as a win. You know, that they would, maybe they did or didn't talk to the boss about it, but having those short little goals that we're talking about, where and seeing those as a win, I think there's pride in that. And just that I did it, I was scared out of my mind when I did it, but I think other people were too. So that's a win, daring to try something that we haven't done, whether it works or not. And so that was my example from this past week.
Yeah, I would guess, but a lot of the pride that really works for us at times is holding on to what might look like small wins, but we sort of hold on to them. And because we hold on to them, and because they're feelings of accomplishment, they sort of grow. And then they become something sort of major in a stream of memory links. So there is that time. Yeah, there is that time I painted the ceiling here and made it habitable. There is that time that you went to the meeting with Rubio and Scott, scared, their aides. And I think there's something in pride that we sort of hold on to it. And I think it becomes, going back to Tamara's point about ownership, it's got to have a certain solidness. It can't be knocked off too easy. And that's where, Cynthia, you're really right. There's a whole lot of perseverance strata stuff here. And I think there's a whole lot of social strata stuff here as well. Because in a way, it is the part of us that is not empathetic, compassionate, the meek shall inherit the earth, turn the other cheek. It's not that part of it. It's a different part of us. And it's a part of us that's in some ways sort of lives in social strata. You know, the way I could talk about being Australian, the way you talk, Victoria, about being Russian. Do you want to come in, Victoria?
Thank you for inviting me. Well, when Tamara was talking about pride of being a winner, I thought my pride is of being a loser. Because this is exactly what brings me to the, deep low, and this is the place from which I learn. And whatever is the loser, but something like you were hoping for something and got something else. That's what we often call like being a loser. But what I'm learning now, that this is something, well, I don't describe it as a pride, but something solid that I know I can always rely on, something within me. Maybe this is this survivor feeling, no matter what. If it's a pride of being a winner or if it's a pride of being a loser, there's something very solid inside I can always come back to. And I know that something bigger, basically, that can hold it all these experiences, if they are on the pendulum, up, high or low. And I think this is this, like, I probably wouldn't call it pride, but maybe it's the same, like inner wisdom, something that is bigger and is connected to this surviving. But surviving, like not surviving, but also living in the surviving, not just to survive or get over, but yeah. And I think, oh, well, I'm very grateful I'm back here in the group, because I'm very proud. I have my pride of making it today, as I've been through one of the most difficult patches in my life, and I am going through it now. I've been going through it now, it's not accomplished. And yeah, it has something to do also with allowing the pride, allowing in that to be. Because sometimes it has this connotation that it's so, I'd rather call it my inner wisdom, but actually it's a pride.
I think the allowing thing is important, and that's where I guess I, come in with what I call the bad press that pride gets. Because I think you're right. I think it is allowing it. And that's close to the ownership of it. And I think we have to allow it to happen. Both pride and hope, they're sort of seeds that are the plants there. And, they don't get any water, then they're not gonna grow. So I think we need to be able to claim, I guess it's coming in and saying, sort of, ego's all right, boasting's all right, not being humble's all right, being audacious is all right. So I think the allowing, like the ownership, it really adds to something. We got it here. Cease.
I was going to say a good example to what Victoria was talking about was exactly that Edmund Pettus Bridge. I mean, if ever there was a disaster, it was where all those people were beaten as they tried to get across that bridge for civil rights, and they were considered failures. And now to be walking proudly across the bridge with everybody rooting for him. I mean, it took a long time to get to that point. But what a great social, what a great example of what was considered, the civil rights was a failure. You could get killed. And then now to have it celebrated, it just seems like it just seems like a miracle. And it wasn't a miracle, though. There was a lot of hard work. And it just seemed like a bigger example of all those people who felt so low being able to get back up again. It's amazing when people can do that. That's what your story reminded me of, Victoria, getting back up again. And that's hard. It's hard.
Yeah. Elizabeth.
Hi. First of all, sorry I was late. I've been thinking about, with chronic illness, the way the source of my pride has had to change. It was either change what I take pride in, or perish. Because I used to be a person who catered other people's weddings for fun and for free. And I could not do that now if I tried. And that used to be a huge source of pride for me. And it's not who I am anymore. But this week, I was enormously proud of myself for being able to approach an unfair, unjust, and unnecessarily complicated series of paperwork situations, dealing with the government at its most bureaucratic, and not lose control of my pendulum. And the progress I've made with my mental health as a person is now the source of my pride, because it can't, things I can do physically in the world of matter can be taken away, and I've watched it happen. And there's no way to take this away. It's inside me, and nothing can get at it. And it was a really hard lesson to learn. That's all.
I think what you said, Elizabeth, about something you can't take away, I think that's a whole bit of it. I think that's a big bit of it. And I think that's where that's where I sort of almost came into this, my intellectual journey towards this. Well, intellectual and clinical journey through this was sort of seeing that, and I've told the Kazantzakis short story here about, the guy who grew up as, became a carpenter and You know, had odd thoughts, and then he had very odd thoughts, and so he went to see a therapist, and the therapist helped him learn that he couldn't say he was the Son of God. So Jesus of Nazareth never became Jesus Christ because he had a good therapist. I mean, that story is crucial for my practice in my field of work, okay? And I think that something that can't be taken away, I think that's a part of it. And I think that, and you know, some of the things I say, particularly, you know, this is here, semi-public, you know, I want to say with some sensitivity, but I think with the indigenous people, you know, Australia, Canada, America, I mean, consciously so much was taken away. And each place, each country had these residential schools, you know, which are now documented. You know, people have written big books about them or made films about them. And some of those were like the 1950s. That's not that long ago at all. And that was, you know, take away your language, take away your values, take stuff away. So I think, I just think some of that's really important.
The last one in Canada closed down in the 90s.
It's unbelievable. Unbelievable. Was that one of the ones in BC, British Columbia?
I don't remember.
Yeah, yeah.
And the Quakers that I'm part of, we're also a big part of those Indian schools.
Yeah.
And we're trying at this point to make our reparations and whatever, you know, we're working on that, but that was bad.
Yeah, yeah.
We've got to come to, we're still working on coming, I don't know. We're still working on it.
Yeah.
The schools aren't there anymore, but we're still working on what we've done.
Yeah. And just bring in the Pelham tools, you know, me as a relentless teacher, I guess. There's some, you know, material life force stuff here, okay? Because material life force is ownership, you know. You know, that's mine. So, and because I know about it because my son's worked on it. We got ill. You know, giving back to the indigenous people whole hunks of very valuable property, okay? So there's something about ownership, material, life force, how if we get too, Cynthia.
Well, I just thought of something when you were saying, and I guess it applies for me as an astrologer, that actually it's really interesting. I just thought that when you're talking about material life force and pride, actually the same house in a chart that there's a lot of philosophy involved. The same house in a chart that deals with property is also the same part that deals with self-confidence and belief in yourself, and I guess pride. So I hadn't even, I just got excited because you said that. I'm like, oh yeah, that's at least in my work part, they are connected. I never even thought of that, you know, because that seems like a connection that, like, sometimes houses, there's things that seem unrelated that are lumped together, and I'm like, oh, well, maybe they're not unrelated at all. Well, it's things that support yourself, things that support, you know, your who you are and how you come across, and so I guess both pride and what you have do that. Oh, sorry, I just went off because I got excited and my pendulum went up because I saw that.
Nikki, do you want to come in?
Hi. I've done a lot of listening in and struggling about thinking of pride, and it's not something I've ever thought of. And then I don't know if I've ever felt it, but then I'm wondering about these things, like a couple of examples in recent years, fairly recent years. It connects up with what was just being said about that it's to do with the material life force. Anyway, and I thought, I think it's that it might be connected with that feeling that I got when I have achieved defeating, like proactively defeating somebody who's been doing me harm. So it's happened a couple of times around the same time, to do with the same thing, the psychopathic tenant in court, where it's like, and the lawyer, by the way, that I employed at the same time, and who was then just in competition with the tenant to be hurt, saw me coming a mile off. And it was the same thing that I achieved in the end with both of them, and it was as a result of the deep work on myself and working through my fear. And with both of them, all of a sudden there was an unexpected moment that I didn't plan, that I was able to just unleash my clarity and anger, and not in a way that even showed, you know, one was to the tenant actually in court in front of the judge. The judge didn't notice a thing, but she did. She knew I'd completely put it all back on her. And the solicitor one was hilarious, because she just kept screwing me over by not being in the office and not having put the things where she told the secretary that she had put them, and told the trainee that she had put them in. And I knew it was just all mindfuck. Sorry about the word. And 2 days in a row, she wasn't even there. I just unleashed stuff about her to each of those two people. And a bit too much detail. Anyway, don't know, really, both situations, a deep change in me, of me proactively putting the stuff out of me and back where it belonged. And I know I had a huge sense of achievement and sort of thrill at myself, sort of like, wow, that was amazing. Both things spontaneous, that I properly achieved something. But I don't know, I'm hard pushed to say about pride. I don't know. I'll have to struggle some more with the concept of, do I feel pride? And maybe not, because if it's associated with material life force, maybe I kind of haven't got enough of that for it to be a prominent thing. Anyway, those are my thoughts.
Yeah, I think there is something there, because the sort of stuff we're looking at here is allowing it and owning it, and, you know, not letting someone take it away from us. But I think particularly the ownership and the allowing. I think they're important parts of it. I mean, I think you could almost say that, you know, some people, because of their makeup, you know, don't don't have much trouble claiming pride. I mean, that's clearly the case of Barack. He can just do it. But I guess a whole bunch of us will sort of struggle with it. And I know in my field, I mean, you know, I maybe a bit soonish, do something more, talk a little bit more about transparency. But I know people in my field of work, because they didn't have transparency, you know, they've killed themselves. You know, I knew a psychiatrist who was sort of very radical, but everything had to be hidden. He couldn't take it. And a lot of therapists, social workers, all these sort of people, you know, got to hide all this stuff because they're going through I mean, just a simple one. I mean, it's not that, you know, the phrase is coming out of the closet, isn't it? You know, that had to be hidden. You know, cost you your career, put you in jail, whatever. And certainly in my field of work, so you know, it wasn't allowed, you couldn't own it. And that sort of took away talent. And I think, I would guess that, you know, you're working as a field of work that is relating to people, but you can't share your humanity, and because of that, it takes you to such a low that you kill yourself. I mean, that's fairly routine in the health professions. It's fairly routine in the, particularly psychiatry. And, you know, all I had to do is say, hey, you know, I'm all messed up. You know, I'm all messed up. I'm a failure. I'm ashamed. Whatever we say. And you're released from it. But hiding. And, you know, I'm sure there's some relationship of that to the, and of course, it gets to the point where it's evil. You know, hiding that Catholic priests had to do, so they end up becoming evil people. So there's some sort of relationship between, and I guess that's a certain sort of ownership thing. I'll own who I am. Mary, before you stop.
I was just thinking, it's just brief, I was just thinking in the examples, like Elizabeth's example and my example, we were stating, and I think somewhat in what Tamara said, we were saying, hey, we can have pride in the community strand. You know, in defining goals and aspirations and wellness and recovery, whatever the sphere is, and saying, we're going to say the community strand's important. That this is a place for achievement and pride, and that would be true in the political scenario too, wouldn't it? With the votes in Georgia and the like the homeless once homeless woman who interviewed me who was going to go into the state senate. It's like that's taking pride in what, as she called it, the University of Hard Knocks.
Okay, we'll end there for today. Continue on this on Wednesday. And Wednesday, I want to call it Hope, Purpose, and Music.
And music.
Yep. Yeah, I don't want to call it that. And ending up, yeah, I'll go first. I'm in Norfolk, in England. Now it's dark outside. And yeah, thank you for coming today. First time I've really presented this material publicly. Nikki.
Nikki in Wimbledon, and it's whatever, 7:30 now. Thank you.
Okay, Tamara.
Tamara in San Francisco, 11:30 a.m. And a lot to think about today. I enjoyed it, the subject.
Victoria.
Victoria in Berlin, Germany, 8:30, quite dark outside.
Cease.
Cease, Tampa, Florida. It's 2:30 in the afternoon.
Okay. Cynthia.
Cynthia, Kankakee, Illinois, and it's 1:30 in the afternoon. And I really enjoyed today too. It was interesting. I don't think I've ever heard pride being discussed in this particular way, and it was really interesting to think about.
Mary.
I'm Mary in Rosarito Beach, just after 11:30, and I found it helpful today, as well as intellectually stimulating.
Elizabeth.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth in Eugene, Oregon. It's 11:30 and sunny. That's all.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for coming, and watch this space, and I'll see you on Wednesday. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye everyone.
Bye bye.